Sometimes in life, the things that we love the most are the very same things that hurt us very deeply. And yes, I'm talking about the pentatonic scale, and to a lesser extent, gummy bears, but mostly the pentatonic scale, which I think is great for a lot of reasons, but also I think it ends up being one of the most detrimental things to learning to play a guitar, training your ears, thinking about music theory, etc., etc. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about it and how we can kind of correct some of the deficiencies of the pentatonic scale. So first of all, what is the pentatonic scale? Pent, as in five, it means it's a 5-note scale. Scale basically meaning a collection of notes that sound good together, that go together, right? So we're going to start with everybody's favorite pentatonic, A minor pentatonic. The very first scale that I ever learned, I think the very first scale that a lot of people ever learned. It's really easy to play, which is part of the reason that it is so beloved throughout all of music. And we're just going to play it real quick. It starts on the 5th fret of the low E string, to the 8th fret, to the 5th fret, to the 7th fret. 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 8, 5, 8. Now, you're probably like, Sean, what's so bad about that? That doesn't seem like a bad thing. But because it's the first scale that everybody learns, and especially me, like I was just self-taught, I kind of taught myself on the internet, I think there's a tendency to kind of get trapped into thinking of the pentatonic scale without really having a full understanding of like a fleshed out scale, which we're going to talk about right now. So basically, this is a 5-note scale. It's a light version of the minor scale. Okay, so here's A pentatonic, A minor. All I did was add 2 notes, and just by adding those 2 notes, you open up a world of possibility, and I think understanding music theory becomes a lot more palatable, and your ear training, there's a lot of advantages from learning this. So all we're going to do is we're going to add the 2 notes that the pentatonic scale skips or misses. So instead of going 5, 7, or 5, 8, 5, 7, 5, 7, we're going to go 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8, 5, 7. And just by adding those 2 notes, again, everything basically changes. So a lot of people, myself included, think that the pentatonic scale is different from the minor scale, different from the major scale. We're going to get to the major scale in a second. But that's really not the case. The pentatonic scale is just, the minor pentatonic specifically, is just the minor scale without a couple of notes. In the case of, if we talk scale degrees, as far as like the numbers within the minor scale, if we're just going to number them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, we're leaving out the 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the 6. And it may not seem like a big deal, but it actually is when it comes to training your ears and learning music theory. I know a lot of players who get trapped inside these pentatonic boxes, and one of the reasons is because there's so much of an influence of this specific scale in music that they just can't break out of it because it's so strong, because you learn it so early. And that's why I never teach the pentatonic scale, really, because I think it's much more valuable to learn the minor and the major scale. So just by learning those 2 extra notes, everything changes, because now we can think of music theory as far as chord building, arpeggios, and scales, instead of having those being 3 separate things. Another thing I remember when I was first learning out is like, okay, I think I need to know my scales, but I don't know why. I think I need to know chords and how they're made. I don't really know why. And I think arpeggios are a thing that I should investigate, but I don't know what they are. Now, if you start thinking of things in terms of the major and minor scale, everything makes a lot more sense. So again, we're just gonna go to the major pentatonic and start using more examples like that. So another shape that you might learn early on is like the C major pentatonic scale. A minor pentatonic and C major pentatonic. The exact same notes, just in different positions. And the positional component of the pentatonic scale is a very valuable thing. And that's something that can be translated to other scales too, or just like the fleshed out version. So the major scale is the most important scale in all of music, in all of Western music especially. But basically, it's the exact same thing. It's that major pentatonic minus 2 notes from the major scale. So if we go to the major scale, we end up going 8, 10, 7, 8, 10, 7, 9, 10. So again, we're just adding 2 of these. Now I'm going to start talking about the names of these notes in the key of C specifically. So we have a C, a D, an E, an F, a G, an A, a B, and a C. So the ones that we're leaving out, if we just talk about pentatonics, are going to be the F note and the B note. So maybe you don't like F notes and B notes because you've just been trained to do like bluesy kind of pentatonic runs and stuff like that. But those notes are super, super important because especially when you're starting out, you're getting more of an ear for the distances, the intervals between notes, which is such a huge help melodically when you start getting into different things. So if I'm just thinking in the C major scale, okay, which is, again, I get just 8, 10, 7, 8, 10, 7, 9, 10. And it's just a shape like anything else. So you can play the B major scale just by moving it, B flat, A. All the same things that we know and love about the pentatonic scale, the movable nature of them, are the same. We're just adding 2 more notes. And it's not that hard to add these 2 more notes. Like, especially with this major pentatonic, you don't have to reach any farther. You're just hitting different notes along the way. And now because we can do that, those 2 notes, we have a fully fleshed out major scale. From this, we can add chords. We can think that every one of these notes, all 7 of these notes, and not all 5 of these notes, all 7 of these notes can become their own chord. The first one, C, can become a major chord. C major. The second one, D, can become a minor chord. D minor. The third one, E, can become a minor chord. The fourth one, F, can become a major chord. The fifth one, G, can become a major chord. The sixth one, A, can become a major chord. The seventh one, B, can become a diminished chord. And then you're back to that. So if you don't know any of that stuff, I've got a lot of other videos to talk about that. But really, this is just more of the concept of using these scale degrees and seeing how they translate musically to things that will actually be very helpful as far as like building chords. In the same breath, you can talk about that and arpeggiating chords from this scale. Like, okay, like maybe we'll take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have like 7 different notes, the 8th one being an octave. And that's just another thing, side note, like an octave, right, is 8 notes away in the major scale. If you think of the pentatonic scale, an octave is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 notes away. So the fact that an octave is 6 notes away just goes against the octave nature, octave meaning 8. All the terminology that musicians use is based off the major scale and not really the pentatonic scale. So again, just one more reason that thinking strictly in pentatonics is not the best thing for your musicianship. So if I wanted to arpeggiate, if I wanted to make chords out of this one scale, I can do those with numbers. Like make a C major chord, I'll make a 1, a 3, and a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take a 1, a 3, and a 5. I can't really do that in the same way chord building wise with the major pentatonic scale. Those notes are all there, a C, a E, and a G. They're there, but I'm thinking about them differently, and the distances between them isn't exactly the same because I would be thinking of that as the first, the third, and the fourth note. When really the numbers are really important, especially if you're like talking to another musician and they're like, go to the 5 chord or something like that. Well, they're talking about the major scale. They're not talking about the pentatonic scale, and that'll leave like that'll give you incredibly different results if you start thinking of numbers in comparison with pentatonics as compared to the major scale. Which again, when you're first starting out, all the numbers and the terminology is confusing enough as it is, let alone having different sets of numbers meaning different things depending on the scale. But I would be remiss to say that there's not value in the pentatonic scale. A beautiful thing about the pentatonic scale is that it's an easy thing to know and you can rip right through it, like E minor pentatonic. You can really kind of rip through that scale really quickly without a whole lot of practice, which is kind of, like validating when you're first starting guitar and like you kind of suck at everything. Pentatonics is something that you can like really kind of build up to really quickly. But it's not that harder to add those 2 notes because eventually I would say a goal that a lot of guitarists have is to be able to play by ear. And the sooner that you can start thinking of the distances between the intervals, the distances between notes in a scale like the major scale, the better off you're going to be. I think one of the most dangerous parts about starting with pentatonics and not getting into the major and minor scale, and I can tell this from very personal firsthand experience, is that my ear was so slow to develop because I didn't really understand like the distance between a root note and a fourth and a root note and a fifth. And those kind of things like you are invisibly working on when you're first starting out. And if you're just skipping those notes by playing the pentatonic scale instead of the minor scale or instead of the major scale, then there's like a whole world of possibilities that you're just missing out on unbeknownst to you, because a big part of like learning an instrument is just being around it and just kind of having your ears figure things out, even if you're not thoughtfully practicing them. Another thing is like once you get into writing your own compositions, maybe a lot of you have already thought that like every time I write something, it kind of sounds the same. In this case, the sound of the pentatonic scale is kind of like a bluesier sound, which again, not hating on blues music, which a lot of you think that I do, but one of the detriments to that is everything kind of sounds bluesy. I used to work in a guitar shop, and 95% of the guitarists who came in just to shred stuff all sounded like bluesy players, and they were really good and they had a lot of skill, but they were stuck in this kind of pentatonic mindset where all they could play was blues. And it's not the fact that, and I know for a fact that it's not because they just loved the blues and they liked how that sounded. That's a different thing entirely. If like that's kind of what you're going for and that's the player you want to be, then by all means go for it. But I think most of it was just because they didn't really know how to get out of the mindset of that. So another great valuable thing from this is just by adding those two notes to the pentatonic scale to make the major scale or the minor scale, which again is just the same scale in a different spot, like the notes for A minor, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, the same notes like just the alphabet without any sharps or flats, is the same thing in C, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So just two positions of the same scale, essentially, right? Now, if I just use the pentatonics and I didn't use the major scale, like we talked about, that F and that B note aren't in there. If I don't have any F notes at all, I can't make an F chord. And if you've like done a lot of songs and stuff, you've seen in the key of C, a lot of times there's an F chord for the most part. And you're almost kind of like taking everything that's beautiful about the F chord, which is the 4 chord, which happens to be my favorite chord, and you're just kind of throwing it out the window, and you're not getting the experience and kind of like just the reps, hearing a change from a C to an F to a G and stuff like that. So that, I think it just kind of like breeds a disconnect between chords, because you'll know that even if you're learning songs to play the pentatonic scale over, a lot of times they'll have like a C to a F to a G, like a 1 to a 4 to a 5. And the disconnect there is that since that F isn't even in the scale that you're using, you're not teaching your ear to kind of maybe like land on that F note over an F chord, stuff like that, that you don't even have to be thinking about it. A lot of times it can be daunting to think, to be like, okay, well, I have to land on an F when an F chord is present. That's not really the case. You don't have to think like that in real time. It's just getting your hands to make the connection to your brain when that's happening. Like now if I'm soloing over a chord, I just land on the thing that I feel like my hands are going to without having to think about it. I mean, subconsciously, I'm sure that like I know that I'm playing an F over an F chord, or maybe it's an F, an A, or a C that's landing on that spot. But that's just because I've been a little bit more thoughtful by playing the minor scale, the major scale, instead of the pentatonic scale, so on and so forth. So again, there's value to learning the pentatonic scale for sure. There's a ton of licks, a ton of amazing licks. You can make the pentatonic scale sound amazing. There's a million guitar players that just crush it. But I don't think it should be a thing that you do instead of learning the full-on major or minor scale. I think it should just be a supplement, kind of like a speed that you have. Like, no other educational system in the world would only give you like a smaller picture of like the bigger whole when it's not that much harder. Again, it's just those two notes, and you're like passing those notes to get to the pentatonic ones anyways. So this is something I kind of wanted to take a second to talk about and kind of clear up the difference between the pentatonic scale and the minor scale or the major scale. And I just think that once you start thinking more in a full scale, your playing is going to take off. You're going to see the connections between scales and chords and arpeggios, which I think those three things are a great way to learn the instrument and connect the fretboard, instead of separating them and thinking the chords are totally different from scales, specifically the pentatonic scale. Everything is the same. I think another thing is like playing rhythm versus playing lead. Like pentatonic stuff is for playing lead, whereas maybe chord building is for playing rhythm. I think that's just all kind of like BS. I think it's all the same thing. You just want to learn how to play the guitar, and learning proper full scales is a great way to do that, to kind of train your ear into hearing these intervals. Even if you're not being super thoughtful about it, just by having those notes available, you're subconsciously training your brain to think that way and getting a better picture of the guitar and music in general. So definitely, I hope this shed some light. If you had any questions, if you have more questions, please hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, the comment section, or the website, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks a lot.